A warm welcome to you all. We'll get going in just a moment. I'm going to give it a few seconds for people to join, and then we'll get started. Looking forward to this discussion. So a very warm welcome to everyone that's joining us live. It's really great to see you here. I'm very pleased to have a special guest, Paulīna Gulbe, with us today. She is the head of commercialization at ICA-Finance. She's playing a key role in a company that's having a real impact on global emissions. And she's someone to watch in the climate finance space. So while much of the focus on greenhouse gas reductions is really on energy efficiency and savings downstream, that of course is hugely important, the upstream energy sector, where fuels are extracted and processed, presents a massive and often overlooked opportunity for significant decarbonization and significant climate impact. Addressing emissions upstream can have a disproportionately large effect, potentially preventing larger emissions further down the line. Furthermore, on this topic, it's filled with complexities and quite a lot of controversy, including crucial questions about who should bear the cost of decarbonization and concerns about fossil fuel lock-in. Paulīna is the head of commercialization at ICA-Finance, a Norwegian company making these impacts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'll let Paulīna give some details about ICA-Finance. But Paulīna, you were ICA-Finance's first employee, and you've been instrumental in their great success of achieving over 1 million tons of CO2 emission reductions and generating over 107 million euros in carbon finance. Paulīna's expertise spans continents and sectors, with experience in many prestigious organizations like the OECD, the Nuclear Energy Agency, and the UNESCO Latvian National Commission. Paulīna holds not two, but three higher degrees. They're from the London School of Economics, from Sciences Po in Paris, and the University of Edinburgh. And her background covers political economy, European affairs, and environmental geoscience. Her research demonstrates the breadth and depth of knowledge. And she's previously studied topics ranging from, I'm not sure if I'll manage with this word, paleoceanography, to influence of interest groups on the EU methane regulation. So great breadth of experience. So today we'll be diving deep into the critical role of climate finance in decarbonizing the upstream energy sector, particularly in developing countries. We'll explore the challenges, the opportunities, and the innovative solutions that are making a real difference. Paulīna, great welcome to the show.
Thank you, Grant, for the very, very warm welcome. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to talk about this critical topic. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Your background's incredibly diverse. I got caught up in some of the complexities of all the different institutions you've studied in and the subjects you've done, ranging from environmental geoscience to the political economy side of things. How did this interdisciplinary path lead you to the current role at ICA-Finance, focusing on climate finance?
It's a very good question. I started always interested in mathematics, in natural sciences and physics. So when I was studying in school, it was quite clear to me that I wanted to do science in one shape or form. And then I went to University of Edinburgh to study geoscience. I knew that I wanted some sort of applicability to the natural sciences that I would be pursuing. And not very far after that, I realized that I'm interested in climate issues. And as soon as we get into such a complex issue, it's clear that you need understanding of policy, you need understanding of economy, you need an understanding of how it is that we actually solve these very scientific issues in the real world. So building on that academically and building on that with my experience in not the private sector as much as the public sector, I realized that this really is a sector that I can work in for many years and not get bored and keep trying to solve this issue. So when I got introduced to ICA-Finance and when I had the first conversation with then CEO and then later one of the founders, who's very instrumental in our company operations still, it was clear to me that climate finance really combines all of these topics. It helps solve the climate issue. It engages with the market to actually help attract private capital into climate issues. It involves a lot of policy. It involves a lot of regulation, and also adapting our economic systems and our countries to the new world of sort of greener energy infrastructure. So this is sort of, it was a no-brainer for me when I joined. Before I joined ICA-Finance, it was a no-brainer that it sort of combines everything that I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's amazing how you've brought together all those issues and knowledge in yourself. And we always say it's an interdisciplinary area of work, but you're covering so many of the bases there.
Absolutely.
You were ICA-Finance's first employee. Can you share a brief origin story of the company? What's its mission and purpose? For listeners, we've got a little QR code up there. If you want to scan it, you can pick up your, you can get a link to ICA-Finance. Sorry, Paulīna, go ahead.
Thank you, Grant. So ICA-Finance really was established with a very clear mission to drive immediate climate action. So that is what ICA stands for in ICA-Finance. And the way we do it is we identify first, and then develop emission reduction projects in the upstream space, in the upstream energy sector. So we want to generate the highest impact in emission reductions that we can, and that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on the emerging markets in particular. So the establishment of ICA-Finance actually happened through a demerger from a company called Carbon Limits. Carbon Limits is a Norwegian climate consultancy that we still have a very strong standing strategic partnership with. In 2021, we demerged to continue the risk-based projects upstream, and with that took quite a lot of legacy experience and expertise with us from the early days at Carbon Limits. So it has to go out. A little nod has to go out to Carbon Limits for also sort of playing a really big role in our sort of legacy and history. In 2023, we had Climate Investment, founded by the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, come in to invest in ICA-Finance. So that is our Climate Investment currently sits on our board. And as OGCI, the organization is consisting of the 12 major oil and gas companies, such as Shell, BP, ExxonMobil, and so forth. We also have that industry backing in what it is that we're doing. We were called CL Invest before 2023, and in 2023 we rebranded to ICA-Finance to have a bit of a distinction between our early days at linked to the Carbon Limits days, and also to sort of clear signal what it is that we're doing in our operations. So that would be sort of a brief history. It's also worth noting that one of our founders is also the founder of Equinor, previously known as Statoil. So he was the founder and first CEO of the company. So sort of it also then explains how it is that we're focusing on the upstream space in the oil and gas sector particularly, because there are many issues there when it comes to emission reductions that can be solved with relatively low-cost solutions. So that's also one of the reasons and sort of why our mandate is to focus on this sector in particular.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's fairly unique positioning in upstream oil and gas, and we're going to come to some of the controversies there. And some people go red in the face when thinking about investments in efficiency in that sector. But in the introduction, I touched on the importance of reducing upstream emissions. Why do it? Could you expand a little bit upon that, particularly why it's crucial in the context of developing countries?
Of course. So when we think about emissions, and particularly methane emissions that have a very large impact in the global warming potential that the actual compound has compared to CO2. And when we look at what are the biggest sources of methane, you very quickly see that is the energy sector. So it's obviously agriculture, and then energy sector comes in. And when looking at it, most of the emissions really come from oil and gas. So obviously lots of emissions come from consuming oil and gas, fossil fuel related products, but it also comes from the upstream production processes. So many of these emissions can be offset. And obviously it has to be said from the very outset that we really need to move away from fossil fuels when we need to scale up renewables, and there's no question about it. But if we think about energy transition in a larger scale, it really is, what is energy transition? Energy transition is a process, it's a period of time in which we will move from fossil fuel-based economies to renewable energy-based economies. There will be a period of time where fossil fuels will still be part of our primary energy mix. So this is something that we're seeing now, and sort of I think there's a little bit of a mismatch in sort of our ambitions and move towards the renewable space to also looking at where we are now and trying to, within this process, also reduce the emissions that we have control over that are linked to the oil and gas sector. So what is the importance of it? One is the highest methane emitting sector within the energy sector that has very low cost solutions. We know that these sources will be around for many years to come as we move towards new economies, and we have solutions for these. But it's a sort of a taboo topic where no one really wants to address it directly because it's linked to the perception of investment into new oil and gas production, which is, in terms of what we do at ICA-Finance, we're very clear about the fact that we're not investing in any new oil and gas production in any direct or indirect way. So what we do is we address the emissions that have a huge global warming effect. And obviously in the developing world, this is something that we see carries the largest impact. So sort of when you look at the facts of what impact we can bring with, let's say, $1 invested or €1 invested in these initiatives, it really is quite obvious why we need to address this and why we need to address this issue right now.
Right. So there's low cost options and the solutions are available. What are some of the barriers that stop this happening in the upstream sector, and particularly in developing countries?
So number one, developing countries really, it's a good category to put many countries into, but developing countries is a very broad group by default. So I would say number one, it probably it depends on the country. It depends on the sort of the regulatory systems the country has in place, the ambitions, the sort of incentive systems. So that's number one. But generally, we see that there's quite a big financing issue at play, where lots of emission reduction projects, especially the ones that bring valuable resources onto the market, still face a upfront financing cost. So this cost has to then be offset by either private capital coming in and sort of saying we will invest in this specific emission reduction project because we see value in it, whether that's through value put through market mechanisms or value of the action itself, so results-based financing, or the value that's put on the resource itself. It could be public sector initiatives, also sort of putting a value to that action. It could be the sort of stick-based regulation saying if you don't do it, there's a cost to it. So companies would carry out these emission reduction projects, or it could be sort of a positive carrot type of an incentive, such as through carbon markets. So all of these different types of solutions would help address the financing issues or the financial gap to carry out these projects. The sort of caveat to that is that the financing is really needed before the projects are implemented. So in terms of carbon credits, which is a commodity that we as ICA-Finance generate, and we trade carbon credits as well, this financing comes in at the end of the project implementation. So you would carry out the project, reduce the emissions, and then receive the carbon credits that then is purchased by various buyers. We need that financing at the beginning of the project. And when thinking about certain types of projects, it could span the amounts that are needed to carry out these projects could be in tens of millions of euros. So this is the space where multilateral banks can come in, or specific funds that have mandates for financing emission reduction initiatives. So sort of it's a teamwork to make these projects work, and it's definitely the biggest barrier that we see. Okay. Also barriers I have to mention it are also a lack of capacity in emission reduction practices. So when we work with developing countries, we make sure that the teams know how to carry out this work, and once the projects are finalized, they keep with these practices and sort of have integrated emission reduction work within their regular operations. Also, regulation is not always very effective. As a real world example, we work in Nigeria, and bans on flaring have been established in the country for more than 2 decades. However, these regulations don't actually very often work to the extent that they are needed. So again, we sort of work with these 3 main barriers and help to address these by bridging that gap.
Okay. Can you help us all to understand a little bit some of the complexities that are there? Just putting it really simply, I hear that you're saying they're low-cost solutions. Yeah, I imagine a methane capture type of activity. Maybe it'll be helpful if you can explain some of what is actually done to reduce the emissions. But I can imagine that adds value. It's not actually a cost. You earn more. Yeah, if you're capturing the methane and doing something with it. So you've got a good investment project there. So why can't the private capital just cover those costs?
It's a very good question. And again, I would say it really depends on the project. Generally, it could be the case. It could be the case where we look at the specific project and see that the NPV, net present value of the project, is positive, and it would sort of make, it would be a financially sound decision to then carry out that project. It could be because of the inherent value of the resource. It could be due to the cost of any penalties that come in with incoming regulation. It could be because of a multitude of reasons. But what we see with the carbon credit projects that we develop, and which is also very a prerequisite to any carbon credit project to be developed, is that many of these projects are not additional. So it means that these projects will not come into fruition unless there is carbon finance revenues that can help to bring this project from a negative NPV to a positive NPV. So yes, there's a lot of value in the emission reduction part of it. So the impact that we bring to the market, there's a lot of value that comes with the practices that the local teams are integrating into their practices. But the value of the monetary value is not, depending on the project, is not always there without the carbon finance. So again, this piece is integral to actually bring it into the positive financially. Then for some other projects, such as flaring projects, where there's a lot of gas that's captured when these practices are implemented, of course, these projects very often are financially sound. And then the argument that you're bringing into discussion is very relevant. Why aren't these companies capturing their flare gas? Why aren't these projects implemented? And it's a very good question, and it should be done from a purely financial point of view.
Makes sense. You've touched on regulation at certain times. Some people might argue, look, the oil and gas sector is rich. There's a lot of money there. That's at least my perception of the sector. And regulation is the way of incentivizing. So even if the net present value of the project is low, then let's put the regulation in place and actually then produce a situation where those companies that have got lots of money invest in the projects that they should be investing in for the good of the planet. So talk a little bit about that interplay between regulation and the investment. What's your reaction on that?
So in terms of the start first from the effect of regulation into the confidence that private investors have in deploying their capital into emission reduction projects and initiatives. So obviously, when we think about market mechanisms, which inherently put value on the emission reductions, that's what the market is doing. Our market is saying 1 ton of CO2 equivalents reduced results in a certain price for that commodity. So this is what carbon credits really are. They're commoditizing the impact that you're making on with the emission reductions. So when a regulator, whether it's a national authority that establishes a national carbon market, or it's an international body that establishes a carbon market that is operational on an international basis, what it signals to a private company or a private investor is that you have confidence that when you develop these projects and when you verify that these emission reductions are concrete and are credible, you will have a price on that asset, so on that commodity. So when if that price is high, and it should be high, because what we're saying is that the cost of you polluting is very high. That's what we're saying when a carbon credit price is high. We're saying you shouldn't be polluting, and this is the price of that. So when it is high, as a private company, as a private investor, the companies have the confidence to put up that upfront investment. What we see in a lot of projects is that the cost is quite high for some of these projects, and unless we have confidence in a price of that commodity, or confidence in the buyer coming in to buy that commodity, is very difficult to bring a very, very good project into existence. So that is sort of the regulation to investor part of the equation. We've also seen that in one of the markets where we operate, that the national authority actually sort of, when it happens, when a regulator doesn't keep up with certain sort of commitments it has made to the private sector, it means that quite a lot of money and good impact is lost because of these sort of these actions and decisions by a national regulator. So it has to be said that is a very important relationship to keep from both ends. In terms of the private sector, I personally believe that there needs to be quite a transparent link between the two. When designing a good regulation, a good policy, whether it's a market mechanism or not, the consultation process between the private sector and the regulator should be fairly open, so that the policy that's implemented actually work with the issues that it's trying to solve. So it's okay not to always make the right sort of first product, but then the policy needs to be adjusted, and sort of we move towards a mechanism that works to actually solve the issue. And at the end of the day, when thinking about climate action and emission reductions, it is a combined work between the private sector, the regulators, countries, buyers, multilateral institutions. So it really has to be a discussion both in terms of the implementation part and the sort of the design of the mechanism in which we're working in, whether it's a regulation or sort of a mechanism based on a regulation or a market.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing a number of key things here. One is that the projects are very costly, potentially. You need a lot of money, shall we say. Even though the solutions are low cost, it's a big investment that needs to be made. Yeah, and these companies don't have that cash sitting around in their bank accounts for the investment. Correct me if I'm wrong. So they need to find and raise the money for it. But there are many of these that, even though these are good solutions, they don't generate of themselves enough revenue in order to make a viable investment. The net present value of the project is negative. Yeah, so it's not a viable project for them. So they can't raise money in the market. Am I getting in the right ballpark here in terms of that thing? So now we have regulation, its role. The regulation can play a role, often it does, of stick. So you say you must do X, Y, and Z. Flaring is illegal. Yeah. And some countries have done that. I think you mentioned right at the beginning, Nigeria, for example. So you can have regulation like that. And you can also have regulation that facilitates the flow of finance to make the net present value positive, to unlock these projects like climate finance, and the market conditions for that. Am I in the right place in terms of the thinking of this?
Yes, I would say so. But then, as with most things, I would add a sprinkle of complexity again. So some projects are very expensive. Other projects are not expensive, and they have a net negative cost to them. So companies should implement these projects. So in terms of the barriers, going back to them, some of those barriers are financial. Some of the barriers are linked to different focuses of companies. So when you think about oil and gas company, what's the initial focus that this company would have? There's a case could be made that it might not be emission reductions, or the funds and the resources that are allocated are not necessarily allocated for these initiatives. So then I would argue the role, whose role it is to make sure that it is a priority. As you said, grants regulation could be one of the ways how this can be done. Positive incentives such as carbon credits coming out of these on implemented projects could be another one. It could be the board of directors saying, this is a very important issue for us. We want to be net zero in our methane, upstream methane emissions linked to production because it's important to us. It could be a variety of those reasons. So I would add that complexity. Yeah. And then, some of these projects actually, one of the projects that we work with is called Leak Detection and Repair project. It's a project type that actually doesn't require a lot of costs to be implemented, but can produce significant impact for these activities, and that impact then can be monetized in international carbon markets. So we see that it very often is the sort of the first steps in how we make sure that the companies start to get companies that we work with start to get interested in these initiatives, because you can see that there's a value of their projects in a financial sense as well, and that very often can then unlock interest in more financially intense projects.
Okay, so leak detection and repair is like a first step into the sector of climate change, of reducing their emissions. It's a good initial step into it. That sort
it can be, yes.
Yeah. Sure. We're getting a question on LinkedIn. Gerardo has said, given the problems with the current carbon credit markets, why not use the recovered products to fund investments? Oil and gas commodities are expected to be traded for a long time. We've been touching on some of these aspects. How would you answer that?
Thank you, Gerardo. It's nice to hear from you. I think it's a very good point. They should be invested to fund these investments, and a part of sort of the recovered product in this case could be the products that are brought into the market and sold at the market value. So as ICA-Finance, we don't take cut in any of these revenues. I believe that the companies that do take revenues of these resources being sold should then consider investing these projects in continuous emission reduction initiatives. What we do in terms of our revenues from carbon credit projects, these are partly invested in further emission reduction initiatives. So Gerardo, I think you have a very good point that carbon finance in a way should act as a catalyst in a sort of a cycle of continuous emission reduction work.
It's the thing that knocks the net present value to positive, to bring it to positive, so that all of this can happen, including using the recovered products to fund the investment. Yeah, but that isn't enough without some type of stimulus.
Very often for a carbon credit project, yes. So I also want to highlight, we brought it up a couple of times, carbon credit projects really have a very stringent requirements of sort of the integrity of the project. The project has to have integrity in terms of additionality, permanence, and other aspects that then justifies why this project needs carbon finance to catalyze the project development work. So additionality would be the argument of saying, without carbon finance, this project will not be pursued. So it is really one of the core requirements to even generate carbon credits. So you cannot take a project that is positive, that NPV is for which NPV is positive, and say we also want to generate carbon finance off of this project, because it really is used as a tool to make sure that we develop the projects that should be developed, but there's some sort of financial barrier that needs to be offset. So it has very strict requirements for companies to access this financing, and this is really a core work of what we're doing. We're working with companies and developing a full inventory for these companies in terms of their emission reductions, and looking at the projects that would qualify for this carbon financing. And we work with the companies on the projects that they also believe they should be implementing. We make sure that these projects adhere to the carbon markets, carbon credit project methodologies, and make sure that they're implemented in the right way. In that process, we also have a third-party verifier, an independent company that comes in to verify the results that we are claiming we're making. So we make sure that it's accounted all throughout the project cycle. Once that cycle is closed, we receive we receive carbon credits being issued by the authority, the market authority under which we're operating, and those credits can then be sold. So really, it's a very regimented process, and claiming carbon finance applies for very specific projects, and they have to be designed in a way that fits the methodologies.
Okay, good. Yeah, some of the rigor there to ensure that this project is additional, that it has real integrity in it, it's long term and such like. Gerardo, thank you very much for your question there. If anyone else has questions, do get them in as quickly as you can. I'm really conscious of the time, and there's so many things that we could talk about. In the introduction, Paulīna, I touched on the concerns regarding fossil fuel lock-in. Let's discuss that controversy a little bit. I know Green Climate Fund at one stage was saying that investments, actually, let me put it this way, in one of the independent technical advisory panels, not the fund, but the advisor in the panel was saying that, investments in cars that use internal combustion engines is locking in finance. So I'm just giving that for a bit of context of the audience. But specifically in this sector, are we really locking in fossil fuel? We're making these companies better, so yeah, they're going to survive longer.
Well, I would first of all say, if carbon finance would have such an impact, then would be a very, very powerful tool. So one, I would say the decision to move away from fossil fuels towards a renewable energy source future really is a high level global decision, and it's a decision based on not only the industry, not only the regulators, also consumption, and sort of the it's a very sort of it's a sort of a meta solution to a meta problem. So the lock-in in terms of carbon finance and projects carbon credit projects that help to bring emission reduction projects into reality in the upstream oil and gas space. For us, we only work on infrastructure that is already there, that is used, and that doesn't have these climate mitigation practices there. So in a way, I mean, that asset will be used regardless of if ICA-Finance goes in and helps to reduce the emissions of that asset. It doesn't increase the production of that asset. It doesn't expand the lifetime of that asset. It doesn't impact the decision on the company or the government or the region to produce oil and gas or not. But it really addresses one of the core issues, especially in methane emissions, that we can address now, and make sure that within that transition period we're not emitting more. We're not overlooking issues that are right in front of our face, because it involves a resource that we want to move away from, while knowing that we're in a transition period where that resource will be present. So these projects, they don't have sort of a direct link to the decision to produce oil and gas or not. So that would be my argument towards the lock-in point.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you. Just in the interest of time, let's focus in on some of the success stories of ICA-Finance. I like this acronym, Immediate Climate Action. It's part of what you're all about, is to make the reductions as quick as you can. So, you know, if you could touch on that, maybe a couple of examples, something, and also say how can companies in the oil and gas sector, how should they interact with you? How would they access the support that you offer?
Thank you. So we work exclusively in the developing countries in Middle East, Africa, and Central Asia. So we carry out projects in countries like Uzbekistan, Nigeria, Azerbaijan, Iraq, and sort of work with the countries and the companies that require this type of support the most, or that have high emissions. We have currently 7 projects on the ground that are working under a very specific carbon credit mechanism that then fuels the financing of these projects. The market is called German Fuel Quality Directive. So through this market, we've been able to facilitate the financing of these projects. So 5 of them are in Uzbekistan and 2 of them are in Nigeria. So we work all 7 of these projects only in 2025 bring in more than 500,000 tons of CO2 equivalents in reduced into the market. So those are then translated into carbon credits. So only thinking about the emissions that are avoided because of these projects this year, it's a significant impact. And that's to say that these projects, one is that a couple of them also were operational in 2024, so that's additional impact. And once the project is implemented, those emissions are no longer being released into the atmosphere. So when we're thinking about one specific project, it really has a continuum of impact spanning many years after the project is finalized. So in terms of these projects, we're really working with 3 types of projects. One is the already mentioned leak detection and repair, which basically stops leaked gas going into the atmosphere by monitoring the upstream energy infrastructure and making sure that no emissions are escaping from particular equipment. The second one is vapor recovery from hydrocarbon storage tanks. So we make sure that no vapors are escaping. So the negative climate impact of that is eliminated. And we also work with flare gas recovery. So these projects specifically have quite a large impact, and when thinking about the health impact of the local communities, is also quite significant. There are many respiratory problems that stem from living or living near flare gas sites. So obviously, as soon as that flare is closed down, there's a health effect on the communities living around these flares as well. And we have very good standing with our partners both in Nigeria and Uzbekistan. So we see these countries forming a part of our focus in the years to come as well. Important to note, we've also signed a heads of agreement with the Ministry of Oil in Iraq, with GHG SAT, which is a private company specialized in detecting methane emissions from above the ground, so using satellite technology, and climate investment. So we're looking to start a nationwide emission reduction work that hopefully, and as we're planning to, are going to bring quite a large impact in Iraq. We also have signed an MOU with Sonatrach, the national oil and gas company in Algeria, to work on reducing emissions with Sonatrach as well. So these are a couple of initiatives that will make our 2025 busy. And in terms of companies that are interested in reducing their emissions and facilitating carbon and climate finance towards financing of these projects, part financing or full financing. The easiest way is to reach out, and we can have a call and a discussion and on how this could look.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's really fantastic. I've found this quite fascinating. I'm absolutely sure that all the people who are watching this live have found it interesting. If you're watching it afterwards, yeah, I hope you find it useful. Please do ask comments or make comments and ask questions in the comments section, both on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We'll keep our eye on it. And Paulīna, I hope if there are some complex questions coming in there, I'll look forward to your inputs on them. So please do ask on it. It's been such a great pleasure having you here, and I really appreciate the work you're doing and for connecting with me on this. Now, I'm putting over here the next LinkedIn Live that we will do. It's going to be run not just by me, but by my company ECO, which is called GCF B41 Unpacked. And B41 means the board meeting of the Green Climate Fund, which took place just last week. So next week on Thursday at an earlier time, 12 noon GMT, UK time, we will have this live stream for an hour. Got some wonderful guests that will participate in that. So please do sign up for it. You can scan this QR code to get there, but you can also find it on the ECO page in LinkedIn and on my own profile. It'll be great to see you there. Paulīna, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to talk about your work. I'm going to put on the QR code for ICA-Finance if people want to connect there, and I guess they can also follow you on LinkedIn and find out more about ICA-Finance there.
Thank you very much, Grant, and thank you for the very interesting series of talks in general that you're doing, and it's been a very enjoyable conversation, so thank you very much.
Thank you, really appreciate it. Thanks everyone in the audience, and Paulīna once more, and see you in the next stream next Thursday. It'll be great to see you here. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.